Kelly Clarkson's song, I Hate Love. Welcome back. It is the Country Viewpoint here on your colour of Country Life, Flow FM. I'm joined now by Senator Perrin Davey, the Deputy Leader of the Nationals. She's also the Shadow Minister for Water and the Senator for New South Wales. It's lovely to be with you, Senator. How are you?
I'm very good. I've just been to a rally here in Deniliquin where the cries were for no more water buybacks, and there was a concurrent rally in Leeton and another one in Griffith. So there's a lot of concern here in New South Wales and across the border in Victoria about the federal government's proposal to buy more water off our communities.
Yeah, I'm glad you went there. That is certainly a topic that we've been exploring a lot on the airwaves here at Flow FM, and the fight certainly sounds like it's on. I've got to say, I've interviewed so many different people over the last few weeks, such as, the commissioner who was on the review into the productivity, Joanne Chong. She said that obviously is one of the authors of that report, the progress made over the last 13 years, it hasn't been enough. The rhetoric and the sort of negative sentiments out there in the public arena with regards to buybacks are so prevalent, and I've got to say I often or never hear of anyone sort of willingly going out there and gleefully cheering on the notion of buybacks. Now, you're making a pretty impassioned sort of push to get people not to buy into the idea of buybacks. Tell us more about your stance right now.
Well, and it's very true. And as you say, I mean, the experience from past rounds of buybacks is while everyone says it's willing sellers, what it is stressed sellers. And even though I'm Senator for New South Wales, but as Shadow Water Minister, I have to make sure I am talking to everyone, and I talk to people across Renmark and Berry and Loxton and down at Murray Bridge in South Australia as well. And I have concerns raised with me from them as well, that buybacks, particularly in areas like within the Renmark Irrigation Trust and Central Irrigation Trust, buybacks can be really negative because they're not strategic. They create a Swiss cheese impact, and they have flow-on impacts on other people within those systems. And Central Irrigation Trust raised a really good case study with me that they actually are reliant on their irrigators to ensure they can continue to deliver water to the councils and to the town parks and to other public infrastructure. So we need to be very cautious when we're talking about buybacks, not to think about the impact of buybacks on the individual who gets the compensation, but to talk about the impacts and the flow-on impacts of what that buyback leads to. That's my concern, and that's why Tony Burke, when he was Water Minister, actually wrote into the Basin Plan that this last portion of water that everyone is arguing about now, this last 450 gigalitres, could only be recovered if it led to neutral or positive socio-economic outcomes. And at the moment, that's what the new minister is proposing to rip out of the Basin Plan, and I can't support that.
Yeah, and just going back to those comments you made earlier, and you've been strong about this in the public, the fact that, people need to understand, perhaps we do have listeners that aren't completely aware of, the complex nature of the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, but it's not just about the farmers, because even though, this is central to them and their livelihoods, there is compensation in line for them, but for other members of communities in those river towns, it's not so much the case for them, is it?
That's absolutely right. And when you look at, the citrus packing sheds and, the wine production companies, the dairy production companies, processors, the rice mills and the grain traders, they're the people that don't get compensated. They're the people that if you don't have enough oranges going to that citrus packing shed, they don't get compensation. They get a redundancy letter. And that's where we start to lose the passion and the community that makes the regions we live in so vibrant and so such lovely places to live. But they're the ones that suffer, and that's my concern. This is not about the individual. This is about the community.
Okay, well, we'll leave that there and we'll move on to another issue that is certainly prevalent around regional Australia, and that is the issue of potholes. We've got the Grattan Institute reports last week, which said that it's going to cost $1 billion to fix this nationwide, but it feels like we've been having this conversation for so many months, and it's really gotten to a point now where it's not just an inconvenience for those who are delivering freight. This is now a concern for people's livelihoods using these corridors around the outback. So just tell us more about how you feel about potholes at the moment, Senator.
Oh, look, I mean, and it was exacerbated by flooding, but it was not caused by flooding. Make no mistake, we've had this issue for a long time, and it is a safety issue. At the end of the day, it's a really concerning safety issue. And what we've seen from this government is just putting things on hold and delay. I mean, the Minister, Catherine King, came in and announced with a lot of bells and whistles that she was going to review all infrastructure spending, a 90-day review. Well, it's been over 200 days, and on the 200th day following the announcement of the review, she cherry-picked some good news stories and dropped them out. But what she sort of let slide was the fact that when she announced the review, she put on hold Black Spot Road funding and the Roads to Recovery program, put them all on hold. They ground to a halt. No work has been done for the last 200 plus days, and all she has said is that the review will look at a way that they can bring back those programs. When will those programs be reintroduced? When will the turf be turned? When will the tar be rolled out? And when will our roads be repaired? That's what she's got to answer, and that's what she's not answered at all. Instead, focusing on the fact that they're still funding the suburban rail loop in Melbourne that has no business case, no qualifications as to why that money should be spent. But she's putting all of our rural and regional road funding on hold while she determines where to cherry pick.
Senator Perrin Davey, stay on the line. We'll continue this very important conversation on the other side of this break. It's the third hour of the Country Viewpoint here on Flow FM. James Bay with All My Broken Pieces. And welcome back. It's the third hour of the Country Viewpoint on Flow FM. You're with Ella Scalios. I've got Senator Perrin Davey on the line with me. Does Anthony Albanese need to prioritise some of these agriculture issues a little more head on? I mean, we saw the whole Optus fiasco not really come to any resolution other than the resignation of the CEO. Still a lot of unhappy people after the developments some days ago now that happened there on the telco front. We've got the Keep Farmers Farming campaign. The first time that we've seen someone go against the government as far as a peak body for farming in some 4 decades. We've got the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. We've got potholes. It doesn't feel like we often get a whole lot out of the government at the moment when it comes to these key issues for regional Australians and the ag sector.
We get a lot of rhetoric. We get a lot of headlines and very little action. And I mean, it's seen by the lack of regional visits by the ministers. It's seen by when the communications minister rolled out the last rounds of mobile black spot funding, it only went to Labor seats. And this was a government that said that they would be the government of openness and transparency, and they would govern for all Australians. Well, they're governing for all Australians who live in the cities, and turning their backs on the rural, regional and remote communities that are the ones who, we really need, we fund the operations of Australia. Resources, agriculture are actually the economic stimulus of this country, but you don't find those industries in the cities. And we need some of the money to return to the regions because we need to be kept safe. We need to be able to keep the lines of communication open, and we need the goods, we need the services that everyone in the cities takes for granted.
Now, lastly, to some comments that you made last week in which you called for a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel in order to allow for humanitarian aid to be enabled. I've got to say, this is not just an issue that concerns the Middle East. I'm seeing things firsthand, just having a walk through Rundle Mall in Adelaide on the weekend, some real tensions spilling out on the streets between, people who are on both sides of this at the moment. So this is now affecting Australian communities, Senator. It feels as though it'd be crazy for anyone not to want a ceasefire right now.
Well, I was a bit cautious in my remarks, and let me be clear that there can be no ceasefire until Hamas agrees to release or releases all of the hostages. Some of the articles today about the conversations occurring to see that happen is welcoming, but a ceasefire should be sought. The ceasefire that should be sought is one where Hamas completely surrenders its armaments, that it ceases all terrorist activities and unconditionally releases all remaining hostages. That's what needs to happen, and we need to ensure that those hostages are released safely. I do want to see humanitarian aid get through to where it's needed, but I've said this before, we need to be very cautious that aid is getting to where it's needed and is not getting diverted by terrorists on the ground.
I don't want to dodge and duck the issue of the fact that, people who are actually involved in this are really paying for it with, a fear of the immediate safety of themselves or their lives for that matter. But as far as things go on the ground in Australia, are you concerned by tensions escalating? We're seeing a lot of that happen in places like England and the US right now. It feels as though we're not too far behind from that.
I am concerned, and I implore everyone to be respectful of people's positions. I think both anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are both abhorrent. I think Palestinians who live in this country and our Jewish community should be welcomed and should be free to go about their lives feeling safe. It is absolutely deplorable that protest activities are actually targeting these communities and making people feel unsafe going about their day-to-day lives. And I would just implore everyone that we are here in Australia, and we should be welcoming all Australians who come to this country, who commit to, living within our communities, to do so and feel safe in their own communities. I don't like to see convoys going through the eastern suburbs of Sydney. I don't like to see protests outside synagogues on Friday nights as people are praying. I think that we need to respect that both the Israeli Jewish community in Australia and the Palestinian community in Australia have a right to be here. Peaceful protest is one thing, but targeted, intimidating protest should be called out for what it is and should be abandoned by all sides.
Deputy Nationals Leader and Senator Perrin Davey, thank you so much for your time. We'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you.
Senator Perrin Davey joining me on the line as we round out the Country Viewpoint for another Wednesday. We'll wrap up the show right after this break. Stay tuned.